Hi, I'm Ben from Universal Audio, and today I'm going to show you a couple of tricks for recording bass and electric guitars using Century Tube Channel Strip plugin for UAD. Let's get started. So as you can see, I've got my electric bass here, and I've plugged into the high Z input on my Arrow. So now, inside the console software, in the Unison slot, I'm going to insert Century Tube Channel Strip. Now to start dialing in my bass sound, I'm obviously going to start with a tube preamp. Now, this preamp can go from clean and just nice and warm to totally saturated and distorted, which on bass can actually sound awesome. Now to help me set this gain stage, I'm going to use a little trick that is available on Arrow or Apollo interfaces, which is called gain stage mode. So to get to the gain stage mode, hit the preamp switch, and then press and hold the big knob, and now you've entered gain stage mode, which you can tell by looking at the GUI. See how the high and low switch now has an outline? If I hit the monitor knob again, it now switches down to the level knob. If I press it one more time, I'm now on the output knob. So this allows you to quickly and with a tactile surface, set your gain stage throughout the plugin. So let me just set my gain in a good spot. Let's try the high gain mode. There you go. Now you can kind of see the overload lights lighting up every once in a while. That's giving you an indication that you may be hearing some distortion. Not a bad thing, just it's a FYI. Next step for dialing in a bass sound is getting the right amount of compression for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the compressor section and dial in the compressor knob until I'm getting a little bit of gain reduction, but not an insane amount. That's almost an insane amount. Let's pull that back a little bit. So there we go. That amount of compression will just hold this bass in the right pocket, keep it fat, warm, and punchy all at the same time. And lastly, there's the EQ. This allows you to add more low end, add more top end, and has a super variable mid-range for really pulling out the bite and the attack and the presence on a bass. So I'm going to start by adding a little bit of low end, and maybe we'll play around with that mid control too. Yeah, getting fatter. I like it. I like it. Let's add some mid. So that's a really good starting point for a bass sound, but more importantly, how does this sound inside the track? All right, let's hit record. So it's a pretty good standard bass DI tone. It's got just a little bit of edge. It's holding it tight in one place. But the cool thing about the Century Tube Channel Strip is it's got a tube preamp in it that sounds rad when you overdrive it a little bit. So let's see what happens when we push the limits. I'm going to turn up the level knob, and you're going to see those red overload lights going a little crazy. You're going to see the compressor working extra hard. It's going to start sounding a little nasty, a little fuzzy, but it might also sound rad. Let's check it out. So now I'm really hitting the preamp hard. I'm going to bring the output level down to compensate. This might be a little too rock and roll of a tone for it, or it might be great. Let's find out. So as you heard, that tone might not work great for this tune, but having that sound inspired me to play with a different amount of energy and actually change the part a little bit. So that's something to keep in mind when you're recording yourself or other people. The sound that you're hearing as you're recording is super important because it informs and inspires what and how you play. So now let's hear what Century Tube channel strip sounds like on electric guitar. So now I've got my guitar plugged into the high Z input on my Arrow, and I'm going to change the unison slot to be the Marshall Plexi amp. So now this tune isn't really calling for like a distorted rock guitar sound, so I'm going to clean up the gain a little bit and maybe just give a little bit more mid. Let's see what this sounds like. This is just a Marshall Plexi Classic so far. So that's a good starting point for a clean guitar sound through a Marshall. Now in the first insert slot, I'm going to insert a Century Tube channel strip. So now an important note, when you have plugins in console in the insert section, make sure that you hit UAD record if you want to print those effects into your DAW, which in this case is exactly what we want to do. So I'm going to start recording and I'll tweak the settings as we go. So at the beginning of that take, I didn't quite have enough gain, so I brought up the level knob, and then for a part like this, where I'm palm muting and just doing a simple single note line, I really want to use that compression to hold it in one spot, give me as much of that transient as possible, and then you saw I added a little bit of the MIDI cue, again, just trying to make this pop through the track in its own little spot. So by the end of the take, I had a tone that I was pretty happy with. So now, I'm going to scrap that take, do one more with this sound, and then move on. So that tone's working great for this clean one note part. But what happens if I just drive this a little bit further? What if I kick the preamp up into high gain mode, leave all the other settings as they are? What's going to happen is I'm going to get more saturation, I'm going to get more compression, which for this guitar sound will mean more sustain and a little bit more bite and grit to the sound, which I think is going to work great for this higher guitar part. Let's try it out. So for a guitar part like that, where I want tons of sustain and I want a little bit of grit, so again, it speaks out through the track, Century with a lot of compression, a lot of saturation, gives me that edge and that tone that I was really looking for. So that's a couple of examples of how I like to use the Century Tube channel strip plugin on electric guitar and bass. Now, as you saw, the workflow for this plugin is super simple, and with just a couple twists of the knobs, you can get really great sounding results. So for more information on this plugin, click on the links in the description. And if you're already a UA audio interface or UAD2 hardware owner, you can actually download the latest version of the software and demo this plugin for free for 14 days right now. And I highly suggest that you try it out. So see you next time.